Chapter 4. Apollo and Hercules. Apollo was proud of his powers. He would let no one be his equal, not even the strongest man in the world. The man was a hero named Hercules. Zeus was his father too, and so Apollo was his half-brother. But Hercules was only half god, because his mother was mortal. Hercules was a giant of a man. He was so strong that on the day he was born, he killed 2 great snakes with his bare baby hands. One thing kept him from being the greatest hero the world had ever known, and that was his temper. He had the temper that would flare up suddenly for the smallest things. When it did, he was like a madman. One time, his temper got him in trouble with Apollo. It happened that there was a king who had a beautiful daughter. Hercules wanted to marry her, but because of his terrible temper, the king did not want him to marry his daughter. So he set up a contest. The king promised to give the girl to anyone who could defeat himself and his sons in a contest with a bow and arrows. Now, bow and arrows were not what Hercules was best at, and the king knew that very well. But even so, Hercules was willing to try his luck, and to the king's horror, he won. The king went back on his promise. He said that the winning arrow did not belong to Hercules at all. Instead, he said that the arrow was his own, and his 3 younger sons all took his side. Only the oldest son, whose name was Iphitus, spoke up for Hercules. Iphitus thought that his father was not being fair. He said that everyone knew that the winning arrow belonged to Hercules, and that he should have what he had won. But nothing could change the king's mind. In the end, Hercules had to go away angry, but empty-handed. Not long after this, some of the king's horses were stolen. The thief was a young fellow named Autolycus. He was always up to some kind of mischief, just like Hermes, the god he worshipped. Autolycus would steal anything, whether he wanted it or not, just like Hermes. So when he saw the chance, he ran away with 12 of the king's prize horses. But he had no use for them, so he sold them to Hercules. They were beautiful horses, with long silky manes. Hercules was proud of them. He rode them, he raced them, and he talked about them far and wide. Very soon the king knew who had his horses. He thought that Hercules had stolen them in revenge, and he sent Iphitus to get them back. Hercules was glad to see Iphitus. He gave him food and wine and told him to see his horses. But when Iphitus asked if he had stolen them from the king, a sudden wild anger came over Hercules. This was too much to bear. With an angry roar, he picked Iphitus up and shook him. Then, holding him by one arm like a toy, he climbed up to the top of the wall of the city. From there he hurled the poor boy down to the ground with all his might. Then his anger left him, as suddenly as it had come. He looked down. Below him he saw the body of his friend, lying at the foot of the wall, like a broken rag doll. He leaped down to it and lifted it from the stones. But it was too late. Iphitus was dead. Hercules was filled with horror at what he had done. He wept and cursed and pulled his hair. Then he went to the oracle of Delphi and asked Apollo what he must do in order to pay for the murder of his friend. In the temple, Hercules found the priestess of Apollo seated on a beautiful seat. It was made all of gold, with 3 legs like twisted golden snakes. Because it had 3 legs, the seat was called the tripod. Hercules stood before the priestess and asked her to tell him what he should do. She looked up at him, standing over her, his head unbowed, and she said nothing. "Speak to me, old woman," he demanded. "What does Apollo say?" Still the priestess only looked at him. Hercules was beginning to become angry. "I am Hercules," he cried. "I demand you speak." For a 3rd time he got no answer. Then madness overcame Hercules again, but this time it was a madness such as he had never felt before. Everything he had saw seemed to turn red. The temple seemed to fill with red mist. The candles seemed to burn with red flames. They dripped drops that looked like drops of red blood. The old priestess sitting before him in the red light looked like a grinning witch. And the snakes that were used as the legs for the tripod seemed to become alive, coiling and hissing. In his madness, Hercules rushed at the old woman. He pushed her from the tripod and picked it up. "There is no oracle here," he shouted, holding up the tripod high as he ran out of the temple. "I have the tripod now. I will be the oracle. Down with Apollo!" At these words there was a flash of golden light. Apollo himself stood before Hercules. "Give me the tripod," said the god sternly. "No!" Hercules shouted, leaping away from him. "You are no oracle." "Thief, put down my tripod." "No, no, no!" Hercules shouted in his madness, "I will be the oracle." He held the tripod close. Apollo raised his bow. "Drop the tripod," he cried in a voice like thunder. Then Hercules swung the heavy tripod to throw it straight at Apollo's head. Apollo aimed the arrow right at Hercules' eyes. There was a death in the hearts of both of them as they faced each other, hero against god. But Zeus, watching his two angry sons, at the moment that Apollo shot his deadly arrow and Hercules sent the tripod flying through the air, Zeus hurled his thunderbolts. He threw a ball of fire between the god and the hero, between the arrow and the tripod. The earth shook and opened up between the brothers as the thunderbolt struck. Both Apollo and Hercules were thrown to the ground, and the arrow and the tripod both missed their mark. When their heads cleared, Apollo and Hercules got to their feet. Their anger was gone. They reached out and took hands, brother to brother. "Why would you not answer me?" Hercules asked. "Why did you demand an answer?" asked Apollo. Hercules fell to his knees before the god. He bowed his head and begged to know what he must do to pay for his friend's murder. And then Apollo answered him. He told him that he must let himself be sold to work as a slave for 3 years, and that he must give all the money to the king whose son had been killed. And Hercules did as Apollo said.